The medical bay of the celestial dawn hummed with its usual sterile efficiency. But in the recreational lounge adjacent to it, something far less orderly was unfolding. Rhea Coulson, the ship's chief engineer and unofficial guardian to a pack of rescued Vacrian cubs, had collapsed onto the worn synthetic leather couch after a brutal 14-hour shift repairing the quantum drives. Her tool belt still hung from her waist, grease smudged across her freckled cheek, and her auburn hair had escaped its ponytail in wild tangles. She was snoring softly, one arm draped over her eyes, completely oblivious to the 9 pairs of luminescent eyes watching her from various hiding spots around the room. Cub Zarket, the smallest but undeniably the boldest of the Vacrian younglings, crept forward on all fours. His iridescent fur rippled with bioluminescent patterns that shifted from blue to concerned purple. At barely 3 solar cycles old, Zarket had appointed himself the leader of their little pack, much to the exasperation of the older cubs. "The alpha is depleted," Zarket whispered in his species' clicking language, his translator collar rendering it into standard as well. "Look how still she lies. Her energy fields are weak." The other cubs emerged from their hiding spots behind storage crates and under tables. They formed a semicircle around the couch, their head tendrils twitching with anxiety. Vacrians were an energy-sensitive species, capable of detecting electromagnetic fields and power signatures. To them, Rhea's exhausted state registered as dangerously low. "Should we wake her?" asked Pip, one of the older females, her violet eyes wide with worry. "No." Zarket's tendrils stood straight up in alarm. "When pack leaders rest, they must not be disturbed. It is sacred recovery time." He had learned this from the human database he'd hacked last week, specifically from a documentary about Earth wolves. Zarket had become obsessed with pack dynamics ever since. "But if her energy is too low, she might not wake up," whimpered little Kessa, the runt of their group. Zarket's bioluminescence flashed brilliant gold, the color of Eureka moments. "Then we must recharge her. Like the power cells, she's always connecting to the ship systems." The plan was set into motion with the chaotic enthusiasm only children could muster. The cubs scattered throughout the ship, targeting any power cable they could reach, pry loose, or convince the ship's AI to release for educational purposes. Within 20 minutes, they had accumulated an impressive collection: standard power conduits, backup charging cables, plasma relay wires, and even the decorative bioluminescent strips from the observation deck. Zarket supervised the operation with the seriousness of a military commander, though his orders were delivered in excited chirps. "Gently. We must wrap the alpha in power sources so her body can absorb the energy through osmosis." "I don't think that's how humans work," Pip ventured cautiously. "Do you have a better idea?" Zarket challenged, his tendrils forming an indignant crown around his head. Pip did not have a better idea. They began their work with reverent care, draping cables across Rhea's sleeping form, blue cables across her legs, green ones over her arms, the glowing bioluminescent strips carefully arranged around her head like a bizarre halo. The plasma relay wires, which, thankfully, weren't actually active, were wound around the couch itself, in what Zarket insisted was a protective energy circle. "More power," Zarket commanded, standing on a cushion to oversee the proceedings. "The alpha needs maximum energization." They piled on every cable they'd gathered until Rhea looked less like a sleeping human and more like some sort of technological cocoon, a bizarre fusion of exhausted engineer and wire sculpture. The cubs stepped back to admire their handiwork, their bioluminescence pulsing in satisfied synchronization. "She will wake strong," Zarket declared solemnly. "We have saved our alpha." That was when Commander Thexion, the ship's Vorlesian first officer, entered the lounge to check on the cubs. His 4 eyes widened in horror at the scene before him. The recreational lounge looked like a bomb had gone off in a power supply depot. Panels hung open, exposed, and sparking slightly. And in the center of the chaos lay Rhea Coulson, cocooned in approximately 200 meters of assorted cables. "What in the 17 hells?" Thexion began. "Sss. Sss." All 9 cubs whirled on him, their collective glare surprisingly intimidating. "The alpha is recharging." Thexion's translator struggled with the layered clicks and whistles. "Recharging?" She's not a... He pinched the bridge of his nose with one of his upper hands. You do realize humans don't absorb energy through cables, correct? The cubs exchanged confused glances. Zarket's bioluminescence shifted to embarrassed orange. But humans need energy. She was depleted. We detected it. Humans recharge through a process called sleep, Thexion explained with the patience of someone who'd been dealing with younglings for too long. And something called coffee, though I don't fully understand that part. But the cables, Kessa whispered, her voice small, will need to be returned before the captain notices half the ship's backup systems are in the recreation lounge. A soft groan interrupted the discussion. Rhea shifted under her cable blanket, her eyes fluttering open. For a moment, she stared at the ceiling in confusion. Then she registered the weight on her body, looked down, and her sleep-addled brain tried to process what she was seeing. Why? She croaked, voice hoarse from sleep. Am I covered in power cables? 9 guilty Vacreon faces peered over the edge of the couch. Zarket shuffled forward, his tendrils drooping apologetically. We were energizing the Alpha, he explained in a small voice. You were depleted. We wanted to help. Rhea blinked at him. Then at Thexion. Then back at the tangle of cables covering her body. A laugh started somewhere deep in her chest, exhausted, slightly hysterical, but genuine. It built until she was shaking with it, tears streaming down her face. You tried to charge me? She gasped between laughs. Like a battery? The cubs didn't know whether to be relieved or more worried. Humans were so confusing when they made that barking sound. Rhea sat up, cables sliding off her in a colorful cascade. She pulled Zarket into a gentle hug, then opened her arms to include the others. You were worried about me, she said softly, once her laughter subsided. Thank you. Little ones. That's very sweet. Even if I don't work quite like the ship's systems, so you won't power down? Zarket asked, pressing his small head against her shoulder. Not if you keep being this thoughtful, Rhea assured him. She glanced at Thexion over the cubs' heads. Though maybe we should have a lesson about human biology. And perhaps discuss which ship systems are off-limits to curious cubs. Thexion's mandibles clicked in what might have been amusement. I'll prepare a curriculum. Though I suspect this story will make excellent dinner conversation for the senior staff. As Rhea extricated herself from the remaining cables, surrounded by chattering cubs who wanted to know everything about how humans actually recharged, she realized her exhaustion had transformed into something warmer. These strange, caring little aliens had seen her vulnerability and responded with pure, misguided love. Later, after the cables were returned and the cubs were settled in their quarters, Zarket approached Rhea one last time. Even if you don't need power cables, he said seriously, you are still our Alpha. We will protect you. Rhea knelt to his level, her heart impossibly full. And you're my pack. Always. In the vast, cold expanse of space, aboard a ship carrying refugees from a dozen destroyed worlds, this was what mattered. Not the technology, not the perfect systems, but the fumbling, beautiful ways beings tried to care for each other, even if it involved stolen power cables and questionable electrical theory.